Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Hurricane Helene dumped nearly 30 inches of rain in parts of western North Carolina and East Tennessee. Communities are reeling from the devastation.
It really feels like we're still piecing this back together and that there's a long road ahead of us.
A new book illustrates the tiny worlds of mountain critters, like a lizard that changes color.
And then it dove under a leaf and ate a beetle. It stayed under there for a long time, and so I got curious and I lifted up the leaf and it had turned bright green, and I was shook.
White potters co-opted the African art of face jugs in the 1800s. A modern-day black potter says his art can't be replicated.
They could not put the spirit and the ideas and the thoughts that I had because they don't have that history.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. As we were working on this week's show, Hurricane Helene hit the southeast, barreling up from the Gulf Coast and leaving a trail of damage through several states. At the time of taping, 133 people have been confirmed dead, and hundreds more are still missing. The storm devastated western North Carolina. It washed away roads and bridges and left people without power, cell service, water, and fuel. On Monday, following the storm, I was able to reach Blue Ridge Public Radio reporter Lilly Knoepp. Lilly lives in Sylva, about an hour west of Asheville. So you are in western North Carolina in the midst of the effects of Hurricane Helene, and I understand you just got cell phone reception yesterday. It's Monday at this point. What's going on? Are you okay, first of all? How are things around you in your community?
Thanks, Mason. Yeah, I live in Sylva in Jackson County, and I feel like we were very, very lucky in downtown Sylva. So I think about 9,000 people in Jackson County don't have power, but in downtown Sylva, there's Wi-Fi and cell service, at least on the main street in downtown. And they do have a boil advisory on water in downtown, but it's really interesting. We don't have a lot of information, but kind of downtown on the streets of Sylva, people are just gathered around coffee shops that have Wi-Fi, kind of trying to, get food and hang out with each other and check in and make sure everybody's okay. So it's been really hard to get information here in Western North Carolina, west of Asheville especially. And so it really feels like we're still piecing this back together and that there's a long road ahead of us.
What did this storm seem like from your perspective? What was your experience?
Yeah, I think early last week, probably about Wednesday, everybody realized that this was going to be pretty bad and started trying to head home and make plans if you can. And we started trying to figure out how to best do storm coverage. And then Thursday night was really the worst part of the storm here in much of western North Carolina. And so, really just kind of holding on tight and listening to the wind and the rain pound. And then, woke up on Friday morning and thankfully, for my family, there wasn't any damage, and that definitely wasn't the case across much of western North Carolina. And so we're still trying to understand where everybody is at.
A lot of western North Carolina is still in a internet and cell service blackout. And so we're still, the outer world still seeing these images that are emerging in trickles. And it doesn't look good. What are you hearing from your team? What's the situation on the ground in Asheville and Haywood County and beyond?
My team in Asheville, a lot of them are still without power. There is some power downtown, but we just got some new updates today, and total in all of western North Carolina for fatalities right now is 40 people. That's 35 in Buncombe County, 4 in Haywood County. They just announced it at about 1 o'clock on Monday, and then one person with the Macon County Sheriff's Office also passed away in the storm, and we found that out yesterday. I mean, that's just a staggering number of fatalities at this point. There are still hundreds of people missing, and it's very, very early in this process, but that's what we know so far as the human impact of this storm. And that's not to say anything about the infrastructure and buildings that have been destroyed. I know, I'm sure you've seen some of the videos over Marshall and Madison County of just water kind of engulfing the whole town. And I think we're still trying to figure out how everybody is doing across the region.
What do the relief efforts look like at this point? What are you seeing from local government, state government, federal government, people helping each other?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a lot of the community coming together and working together. You know, I'm at a friend's house using their Wi-Fi to do this interview. I think they're going to come over and use some of my well water later. And so it really feels like the community is really supporting each other in Western North Carolina. There are services that are coming out from the local governments, whether it's free Wi-Fi that's available or getting donations together. I know some of the counties in the region who were not hit as hard have been very quick to bring supplies to the other counties. Today, there were water trucks, in downtown Asheville that were privately purchased so that folks could have water. Really still trying to get those resources. I know FEMA is on the ground in Asheville as of Monday today, but we're still trying to understand what resources are available.
What do y'all need? What are the shortages you're seeing there, and what can people outside the region do to help?
I mean, there's so many people who are still cut off. I understand there's some nonprofits that are taking helicopters out to remote locations to try and get supplies to folks. Blue Ridge Public Radio has a list of organizations that are working to help right now in Western North Carolina, and you can check that out on bpr.org. We'll keep updating all of the community and local government places where you can donate.
We'll share that out through our website as well. What do your next few days look like? It's Monday, and it's already been a heck of a weekend. What are you going to be doing in the next few days?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like right now there's a fuel shortage, and we're hopeful that fuel will be able to get into the region. But right now I'm just trying to, hunker down and use as few resources as possible, because I think this is going to be a long road. And sure, it feels like a lot of people feel that way, that we're not sure when we're going to get these updates. A lot of the government officials I've spoken with say power might be back on for much of the region at the end of the week. But obviously it's Monday. Friday is a long time from now. So really just trying to help out people who need it and try and get as much information out there as possible. That's what we're trying to do at BPR. Make sure people know where they can go to get water, to get food, and to get those resources.
What else do you want to add? What else do you want to say with this platform?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Canton's Mayor Zeb Smathers about just how big of a failure this is from communication providers. He was saying that it's just unacceptable that all of our communication networks would fail during this time. Local governments are operating with radios with their emergency management systems, and it just feels like it's taking a long time to get any information and any updates, and it's really too long. And I think it's really concerning. It's really hurting people, and that lack of infrastructure is something that I think we'll be talking about for a long time.
Well, Lilly, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Stay safe down there, and appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks, Mason.
That was Blue Ridge Public Radio's Lilly Knoepp. BPR has compiled a list of ways to donate and help. That's at bpr.org. Helene also rocks southwestern Virginia, where flooding caused water and power outages, and some people lost their homes. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd reports from Pulaski County, Virginia.
83-year-old Elizabeth King has lived along the New River most of her life in Wythe County, one of the areas most impacted by last week's flooding. Her husband is buried in a waterproof casket beside the home they shared on the bank of the river for decades. She says she didn't want to leave, but her daughters made her. Today, she sits on her daughter Kathy's couch, holding her small brown dog Bandit, with tears in her eyes.
Everything's gone. What'd I tell you? That's just memories. Our main concern was you. I know.
Kathy and her sister Susan drive me to their mother's home. High water pushed her wooden front porch away from the house. A peach tree her husband planted is broken. Inside the house, everything is damaged. Their father's grave, however, is still intact, and they're grateful the water didn't take him away. Plastic flowers still stick in the mud surrounding his grave.
We promised our daddy on his dying bed we'd take care of her, and that's what we intend to do. Didn't it?
Yes. That was his biggest fear.
Her being took care of.
Them two were like two peas in a pod.
They're working to find out if their mother's home insurance will help her rebuild. For now, she is staying with them. Downriver a few miles in Pulaski County, dozens of people are starting the long process of clearing out mud and trash from their homes. Many here in the community of Allison couldn't drive down this road to their homes until Sunday, when the water began to recede. Motorcycles, boats, clothes, even a mobile home were scattered in the road and yards when the water went down. A friend hugs Brian Sale as they stand in muck boots, overlooking the damage to Sales' home.
Oh, my gosh.
Friends and family have come out to help Sale and his wife clean.
I think I'm still in shock. We watched all of our stuff float out of the house. I mean, it was bad. This is material stuff. It can be fixed.
Many of the people who were displaced have been staying these past few days with friends and family. Others have been sleeping wherever they can find a place to rest. Jamie Arnold is the volunteer fire chief in the Allisonia community.
A couple out of one of the houses, they actually slept in their van over here beside the fire department a couple nights.
Some temporary shelters have been set up in communities across Southwest Virginia. Local organizations are setting up donation centers to collect for flood victims here in the Commonwealth and further south in the Carolinas. One drop-off location is in Dublin at the Pulaski County Free Store, where Heather Short is a volunteer.
I know I've heard multiple times people have just lost everything. So we currently are accepting things like blankets, tents, sleeping bags, tarps.
Water is another need across all of the impacted communities throughout the Southeast. Volunteers are also collecting donations in Giles County and in Blacksburg. State officials are still assessing the damage and trying to determine how many people in Virginia are in need of housing as a result of last week's storms. In Pulaski County, I'm Roxy Todd.
The storm damage from Helene is a developing story. We'll have more reports from the region next week. Coming up in this episode, a nature artist explores the tiny worlds of the Appalachian Mountains. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, educating the people of our region and beyond for more than 150 years. More information at concord.edu.
In 2022, nature artist Rosalie Hazlett set out on a trip to illustrate parts of the Appalachian Mountains that often get overlooked. That is, the tiny birds, reptiles, and other critters hiding beneath leaves or up in the trees. Her illustrations came together as Tiny Worlds of the Appalachian Mountains, an Artist's Journey. It's a new book, full of colorful images and thoughts Hazlett recorded as she spent hours exploring the mountains. Producer Bill Lynch recently spoke with Hazlett about the book.
To begin with, where did the idea of the project come from?
So I have always had a special affinity for small creatures ever since I got my first hamster when I was 8. I know a lot of kids go through hamster phases. I think mine was a little more intense than most kids. And that kind of spun off into a love for all rodents. And then that love for tiny creatures just kind of continued as I started to learn more about the natural world as I got older. And always wanted to be an artist, but wasn't really sure what to focus on with my art. And it wasn't until probably college and my early 20s that I realized that I could pair art and nature together and I could make work that celebrates the natural world. I started a personal project in 2017 called Tiny Worlds West Virginia. And that was just, my goal was to get better at watercolor and also to learn a little bit about a new creature every month. And in 2021, I got really hyped up on caffeine one day and I took a big walk and I was like, what if I illustrate a whole bunch of tiny critters from the whole Appalachian mountain range? And before I could talk myself down from it, I called the guy that I was going to marry in a week and I was like, can we move out of our apartment and do this huge trip and document all these things? And he was like, yeah, let's do it.
Tell me about your husband. And this is, it's a pretty big leap to do something like this.
Yeah.
So tell me about him.
So he is a water engineer and he works remotely. And so it worked out that he was able to keep working while we were on the road. So we ended up going on this trip. It was 6 months in total, a continuous road trip. Started in Alabama, which is the southernmost part of the Appalachians. And then we ended in Newfoundland, which is the northernmost part in North America. It extends into Scotland. And pretty much every day I would go out and look for interesting small critters, plants, fungi, slime molds, all sorts of stuff. And then I would document my observations with, words and then sketches and take pictures. And then I'd come back to wherever we were staying and I would illustrate what I saw using watercolor.
The trip itself and the places you went, how did you choose them?
So we wanted to take advantage of discounted rates at different rentals. And a lot of them, you have to stay in a place for 2 weeks or longer. We had 6 main base camps all scattered throughout the mountains. We kind of just looked at a map of the Appalachian Mountains and we found these locations that were close to public lands, so national park or something nearby, state parks.
Words and pictures, which was harder to get down?
Oh, words. I've never really thought of myself as a writer. I've been a journaler my whole life. I kept very regular journals from the time I was 5 to 18. Every day is documented. So I always like to record what I saw, but I never really tried to write essays or poems or polished writing. It was always just very casual. And so I kind of leaned into that for this book because I was really psyching myself out about the writing. I originally wanted it to be all illustrations and just the tiniest descriptions of what I saw. And then as I was working on it, I realized that it was becoming disjointed and I needed to tell the story more through words so that people could understand what was happening if they weren't there. On these long hikes, I'd be by myself, so much time in my own head. And so I would just jot down what I was thinking or what I was seeing in my phone in the notes app. And so I basically wrote the whole book while I was walking or sitting on a log because sometimes I'd be tripping over stuff. So I'd stop and I'd sit on a log and I'd write out a observation or the beginning of an essay and then I'd edit it later. And that actually works really well for this book because I want it to feel like you're walking alongside me through the mountains.
There's definitely a feeling of being in your thoughts. There's a lot of introspection in the book. You kind of gloss over portions of your childhood and even how you got there, which made me interested in your childhood, in your upbringing. You were homeschooled?
Yeah, I was homeschooled till I was about 12. Yeah, and I'm one of 7 kids, so had kind of a weird childhood. Lived on a farm, was in a family band. I talk about a lot of these things in the book, and it was a very beautiful childhood, but a little weird.
The family band. Tell me just a hair about that, because
yeah. So I have. Let me see. I don't even know how many older siblings I have. I have 3 older siblings. I've lost count. 3 older siblings, and so by the time I came along, there was already a family band established, and they all played instruments. And so it was just kind of a thing that when you're born into my family, you are part of the band. And we were not a big deal, but we did travel around quite a bit to state fairs, festivals, churches, family reunions, and we'd all be standing up there with our old-timey instruments. It was very much like Americana music, so a lot of like John Prine and the Carter family. Yeah, we played lots of tunes together. My dad wrote a lot of the songs too. It was a good time, and it lasted until I was about 14. And I write about that in the book, that I was kind of the demise of the family band because I went to school and my peers found out about the band and they did not think it was cool. So I ruined it. I broke up the band.
Well, this project, what was your favorite part about it?
Oh, well, there's so many things. One of the things that felt really special was just getting to dive deep into a project for a couple of years. So the trip took 6 months. Planning the trip and getting some grants to help pay for the trip and finding a publisher took a full year before we even left. Coming back afterward, I spent a year finishing all the paintings from those reference materials. So I was able just to kind of lose myself in the project, to lose myself in the places. Even after we got home, I had spent so much time in each place and was so present in each place that I was able to access those memories in a way that I haven't been able to before. So I'd be like working on the section about Quebec, and I would see my husband at lunch and I'd be like, he would ask me what I've been up to, and I'd be like, oh, I'm just in the woods of Quebec right now. Like mentally, like I was there because I had so much time in each place, and that was really a treat.
Do you have a favorite critter?
Oh, there's so many good critters. I'll tell you about two. In Alabama, one of the very first things that we saw was a green anole lizard, and they're sort of like chameleons. They change color based on their temperature and mood. So I saw this little brown lizard on the trail, and it was holding very still. So I was very pleased because usually small critters often, because they don't have a lot of defense mechanisms, they're very speedy. So that's a constant challenge with this book, because I only wanted to include things that I actually saw and got my own pictures of. So I couldn't, even though like hellbender salamanders are so iconic for this area, I didn't see one on the trip, so I couldn't include it. So I was watching this little lizard. It was holding still. I was very happy. And then it dove under a leaf and ate a beetle. It stayed under there for a long time. And so I got curious and I lifted up the leaf and it had turned bright green. And I was shook because I did not know that they changed colors. I just thought I was looking at this brown lizard, and then all of a sudden it's this beautiful lime green. So that was a really cool surprise and a lesson in like just watching a critter for a long time will lead to interesting observations. And then the second one I want to talk about is actually an eastern screech owl that I saw after we returned from the trip. So after the 6 months on the road, we came back to the farm that I grew up on, and we lived there for a while. And my goal was just to see this place that I knew so intimately with fresh eyes after the trip. I wondered, after so many months of slow hiking and paying attention, what will I see that I might have missed before? One of the coolest things that I saw right around the farm was an eastern screech owl who lived in a hollow in a tree. And I just stumbled upon this owl one day, and I don't even know how I saw it. It was so camouflaged, but I was just like looking around and saw two eyes staring back at me from this hole. And that owl stayed there all winter long. And that's something that they often do to kind of stake their claim for nesting in the spring. That owl kind of became my muse when I got home, because it was really easy after seeing all this cool stuff on this long trip to think like, oh, what else is there to see in my home? Like, I know everything. It's less exciting. But then thinking about my owl being there and how like hidden it was and how I wouldn't have found it unless I'd been looking closely made me think like, oh, there's probably so much more here that is yet to discover. And that's been a really nice takeaway, is like, it's not always about going elsewhere to find that inspiration, that you can find it in your own backyard.
The book is Tiny Worlds of the Appalachian Mountains, An Artist's Journey by Rosalie Hazlett. Rosalie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tiny Worlds of the Appalachian Mountains, An Artist's Journey is available from Mountaineer Books. By way of disclosure, Rosalie Hazlett's sister, Clara Hazlett, is one of our Folkways reporters. An exhibit of Rosalie's work is on display through December at the Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences in Charleston, West Virginia. You've probably seen pottery with a face on it. Maybe a decorative teapot done up like a stern Uncle Sam, or an elongated milk bottle with a sculpted face that looks a little like your brother-in-law. There are lots of examples of face-shaped vessels out there, from cheap souvenir shop knickknacks to museum-quality pieces that can sell for millions of dollars. Some are connected to African face jugs, an art form made by enslaved people in the Deep South in the mid-1800s. In 2023, Folkways reporter Zach Harold traced the story of face jugs, beginning in the basement pottery studio of West Virginia artist Ed Klimick.
The tools of Ed Klimick's trade look something like what you'd find on a dentist's tray, but that's not what he uses them for.
These I could slice the eyeballs in half. This one I can put like in the corner of the eye and the mouth, maybe separate the teeth a little bit.
Now that makes him sound like some kind of homespun Dr. Frankenstein, but Ed prefers to work in clay. For over 20 years, his Shinson, West Virginia pottery studio has been churning out all kinds of creatures. Some look like Santa Claus or gray man-style aliens. Ed also has a penchant for making devils.
Well, it's like that guy right there. He's smiling, right? Did you don't know why he's smiling?
These characters appear on hand-thrown ceramic jugs, about the size of your standard 2-gallon milk jug. Ed makes faces on coffee mugs and cookie jars too, and shot glasses, though due to their size, they only have one facial feature apiece: a nose, some lips, or a single unblinking eye.
So, you have a drink with a friend, you say, here's looking at you.
Ed's face jugs, sold under the name Jughead Pottery, are well known in the West Virginia art scene. He's been featured in galleries all over and was juried into the state-run Tamarack Market, where collectors regularly snatch up his work. But Ed's journey to becoming a successful full-time artist was a long one. Growing up and then as an undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin, he tried his hand at different art forms: painting, silversmithing, wood carving. Then came the Vietnam War, which derailed his plans for grad school. He ended up spending 8 years in the Air Force, working much of that time as an illustrator. Once his enlistment was up, art remained a hobby as he worked a series of blue-collar jobs, as a carpenter, a window installer, and finally as a pattern maker at a foundry in Fairmont, West Virginia. About 20 years ago, news came that the foundry was shutting down. Ed was laid off. But instead of looking for another 9 to 5, his wife encouraged him to try the art thing full-time.
She told me, she said, if you don't know until you try it. So go for it, dummy. So I did. It was a little bit of a struggle beginning, it takes time to get a business started.
At the time, Ed was working with raku, a traditional Japanese style of pottery, but there wasn't a whole lot of interest in his work. Then he saw a TV program by the interior designer Lynette Jennings.
I forget what the name of the program was, but it was about home decorating. And she had a thing on there about face jugs being very popular and collectible. It was a Southern thing.
Inspired by that program, Ed started to make face jugs of his own. But as he'd learned, the vessels were more than just a Southern thing. The art form has roots in Africa, having crossed the Atlantic in the minds and hands of enslaved people. In fact, we can pretty much trace the tradition to a single slave ship, as historian Wayne O'Brien told me.
So in 1808, you were not supposed to bring any more enslaved Africans from Africa. Well, in 1858, 50 years later, a gentleman named Charles Lamar decided he wanted to reopen the slave trade. And he said, catch me if you can.
Lamar found himself a racing yacht dubbed the Wanderer and set out for Africa.
So he sailed over to the Congo in West Africa in 1858, took about 400 Africans on board, brought them back to the U.S. The authorities did hear about it, but he outran them to the coast.
Lamar landed on Jekyll Island in Georgia. But even after escaping authorities, he had a big problem. He was in possession of dozens of people who did not speak English, had never had any contact with the West. It was obvious that they had been illegally trafficked, so he needed to disperse these enslaved people fast. A cousin took some of them up the Savannah River into South Carolina, eventually ending up in Edgefield County. Then, as now, the area was known for its potteries. Many of the people Lamar smuggled ended up making ceramics. And in their off hours, they started making traditional vessels from their homeland.
Somebody actually recorded that these Africans that just landed here are making these grotesque face vessels. They call them face jugs. Almost all of these face vessels date to that time, after 1858.
One prominent feature of these jugs was their stark white teeth and eyes. These were made from kaolin, a white silica clay also used to make fine china. The enslaved potters recognized it because they had it back home in Africa too.
And on the African continent, that is the ingredient that gives the vessel power.
See, no one was selling face jugs at the time. These were meant for personal use in spiritual rituals.
These practitioners can reach to the spiritual world to get information. And they would use these objects kind of as a tool.
And those kaolin eyes and teeth were essential for those practices.
The kaolin would be the battery in your phone. So without a battery, the phone you still have the object, but it won't work without the battery.
The power was largely cut off following the Civil War. Pottery is an expensive craft, and after the war, many black potters lost access to the materials they needed to make their art. White potters, meanwhile, saw the popularity of the face jugs and appropriated the art form. They started making the vessels to sell to tourists who came to see the post-war South.
Well, you know how they say the sincerest form of flattery is imitation.
But once the art form was out of black potters' hands, the history of face jugs as sacred objects started to be forgotten. Stories still circulate that the vessels were used to scare kids away from the beer or moonshine kept inside, even though enslaved people weren't usually allowed to have alcohol. The traditions were not lost completely, though. I mean, if black potters and their face jug traditions could survive the Middle Passage and slavery, they could survive anything. Today, the black face jug tradition lives on through a new generation of potters, like Jim McDowell of Weaverville, North Carolina. Jim grew up hearing stories about face jugs.
And my granddaddy was a tombstone maker down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And he started telling us about face jugs. There was an ancestor in our family, and they said she made face jugs. It was a family history, oral history.
Though he displayed artistic talent from an early age, Jim didn't take up pottery until he joined the Army and was stationed in Germany, where he started hanging out at a pottery studio in Nuremberg. He continued to study the art form back in the States.
I was at this university in Pennsylvania, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It was a white guy making face jugs. And I looked at that thing and I said, no, I think I need to make it myself. So I started making them, but I put black features on it, the scarification, the big noses, exaggerated, and ears, and use glass for teeth or broken china plates,
Unlike Ed Klemick's face jugs, with their realistic, if exaggerated looking faces, the features of Jim McDowell's jugs are rougher, more reminiscent of the look of the original Edgefield face jugs. He once told the Smithsonian, "My jugs are ugly because slavery was ugly."
I don't have any preconceived notions of what I'm going to make. I have an idea like Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King or John Lewis. I think that thought is there. But when I put the nose on, then I feel like I get influences from the ancestors, and I do certain things that maybe I don't even realize. I'm versed in pottery as far as aesthetics and how to put it together, but the ideas they don't come from me.
Jim feels a particular kinship with David Drake, an enslaved Edgefield potter whose work now sells for millions of dollars and was recently featured in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
But his pots are still here because the writings reflect what he was going through.
You heard that right. In a time where it was illegal to teach enslaved people how to read and write, Dave was making inscriptions on his pottery. And not just inscriptions, but poetry. Clever, funny, heartbreaking poetry inspired by what was happening in his life. After Dave's master sold his son and wife to another slave owner in Texas, he inscribed a pot with this couplet: "I wonder where is all my relations, friendship to all and every nation." Jim tries to channel his own frustration and anger into his face jugs. Some of his recent works have been inspired by the murders of Emmett Till and George Floyd.
I do it because if I don't do it, I feel like this story is going to die. Somebody has to tell, even though people may not want to listen.
For someone with such a deep spiritual connection to this art, I asked Jim how he felt about the history of white potters co-opting it.
I really don't. I'll be honest with you. I really don't have a problem with it.
He says he doesn't begrudge white potters who make face jugs because, well, everybody's got to make a living. And there are European traditions of ceramic vessels with faces on them. But remember what Wayne O'Brien told us? A traditional face jug without kaolin is like a phone without a charge. No power, just an object. Well, to Jim, a modern face jug that isn't shaped by the black experience is kind of like that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine to look at. It just doesn't have the same power.
They cannot put the spirit and the ideas and the thoughts that I had because they don't have that history. Their history is from England or Scotland or over there, So I don't quibble on it because you can't copy me.
For Inside Appalachia, I'm Zach Harold.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. To see photos of Ed Klimick and Jim McDowell's pottery, visit our website, wvpublic.org. The fall leaf season is prime time for a lot of tourist destinations in the region. People come to see the vibrant reds, yellows, and oranges that cover our mountainsides. But this year, those colors might be muted after a summer of hot, dry weather. Eve West is a New River Gorge National Park ranger. WVPB's Brianna Heaney spoke with West about the effects of weather on fall color.
It's been a very dry summer, the worst drought on record. How will this affect the fall leaves?
Well, it's probably not going to affect them very well. I'll just be honest. But, we hopefully will get some rain between now and when things begin to turn. Of course, things are already kind of started to turn a little bit. But, what typically triggers fall is when you have the longer nights, the shorter days. But you do have other varying factors such as moisture and then also temperature. And so moisture has been kind of our limiting factor this time. So yeah, of course it's been hot too. So I'm not sure. We'll have to kind of see what happens. But usually when you get your best falls or when you have like a warm, wet spring and you have a real good summer, and then fall is you get warm, sunny days and you get those cool, crisp nights. So maybe we'll get some cool, crisp nights and warm, sunny days in the fall. So that'll help. But a little bit of moisture would definitely help as well. So.
Okay, so moisture, even this late, could still be a positive thing.
It could help, yeah. Now, it's better to have it early on, but it could still help.
So moisture, that's the factor that we have going against us in this very, very dry summer. What other factors contribute to a good fall turnout, and what are some things that could happen this fall to help the colors last a little longer or shine a little brighter?
Well, as long as the fall temperatures don't, we don't have some sort of summertime extremes in the fall. We've had cooler temperatures late this summer, which has not been a bad thing at all. But, if we end up with some nice fall days that are warm and sunny, and we don't get high winds, that's the other thing. These high winds, once the leaves start to dry out, can really they can just, or your storms, they can really knock the leaves off the trees fairly quickly. Yeah. So, but if we get those cool nights, warm sunny days during the fall, and we get some moisture between now and then we will maybe still have a good fall. We'll see. I mean, it could very well be.
Yeah, my fingers are crossed because I love fall here in West Virginia. Yeah. And so do a lot of people, including people who don't live here in West Virginia. The fall colors are a big driver of tourism.
Exactly.
How will some of these lackluster colors or short-lived colors affect how many people come visit the region and come visit the national park this year?
I don't really think it'll have a huge impact because people come. I mean, the fall is a wonderful time of the year here. I think with all the events that we have going on, Bridge Day, all the smaller town festivals and things, the good hiking weather, golly season coming on, I think we'll be just fine.
That was New River Gorge National Park Ranger Eve West speaking with Brianna Heaney. The invasive spotted lanternfly first showed up in the U.S. and Pennsylvania, and over the last decade has spread across Appalachia. You might have been taught to squish them on sight, but some scientists are asking people to collect them instead. Carol Holsapple with the Allegheny Front has more.
Native to Asia, adult spotted lanternflies with their tan and red wings dotted with black were first spotted in eastern Pennsylvania a decade ago and have spread across the state. For Michelle Duenas, a biology professor at St. Vincent College, the insects present an opportunity.
We want to kind of build like a historical collection that is a DNA museum and molecular museum of their presence here and how they're changing over time.
A couple of years ago, she co-founded the Spotted Lanternfly Invasion Archive with Al McDonnell, a biochemistry professor at Chatham University. It's a community science project in Allegheny, Westmoreland, Butler, and Washington counties. And I started by asking Duenas how it works.
We're asking people to go out and collect bugs for us. If you sign up online, you will receive a kit in the mail, and in that kit will have instructions on how to catch them and how to kill them, and then a tube that you will put rubbing alcohol in with the bugs. Last year, we sent out one tube and had people collect 5 males and 5 females. There's also a guide on it. Females have a red spot on the tip of their abdomen. If you don't want to put the bug right into the alcohol, you can put them in the freezer, and then once they've been euthanized, you can put them in the tube. But we're also going to ask people this year to collect dead ones that they see. So as I'm sure a lot of people are noticing, their numbers in Pittsburgh do not seem actually to be that high this year. A lot of people are finding them dead as well. And so also there will be a separate tube for putting ones you find dead that aren't squished, so we can kind of do a post-mortem on them and see if we can figure out what happened to them.
When people return the samples to you, what do you do with them?
Hi, it's Al. One of the beautiful things about working with the spotted lanternflies is that we can use the entire spotted lanternfly to do research. One of the main things that we're looking at this year is particularly the gut. So I'm going to be, along with students, extracting the gut, smushing it up, and then extracting the DNA. We're hoping to do a study on plants that they could be consuming, bacteria that could be in the gut, as well as fungi. One of the things that we think could be killing the spotted lanternfly randomly is fungi.
This is Michelle. With the wing pattern, that's a much longer term goal. So one thing we'll be doing with them is pulling the wings off and looking at wing pattern variation, not just in the veins in their wings, but also the spots on their wings. So research at Penn State has shown that you can identify an individual spotted lanternfly by the spotting pattern on its wings. So we pull the wings off, put them on microscope slides, and image them to look at differences in wing patterns based on geography and where those samples have come from.
And you are asking folks who sign up for this to do it each year.
It's Al. Yes. The overarching goal is that we'll be able to have folks collect this for time to come so we can truly build an archive. We're also hoping to get schools involved. I think the community aspect of this is something that we're really looking to heighten, including having like community gathering events where we can talk about invasive species in general, ways to improve Pittsburgh's community involving our native species to try and cultivate that more in the city.
Al McDonald and Michelle Duenas are co-founders of the Spotted Lanternfly Invasion Archive. To learn how you can get involved, visit the Allegheny Front. Christopher Rowe is a Kentucky science fiction and fantasy writer. His stories have been finalists for the Hugo and Nebula Awards, which recognize the best work in science fiction. Kentucky Public Radio's Sylvia Goodman recently spoke with Rowe just after he moved back to Columbia, Kentucky, where he grew up.
Rowe says a journalist once described him as a, quote, rural fabulist. And he's had a bit of what he calls a renaissance lately. After a publishing hiatus, he came out with a short story collection in 2017, and more recently, 2 new novellas. He's working on another one now.
The future happens everywhere. The future does not happen exclusively in outer space. The future, sure as hell, does not happen exclusively in Los Angeles and New York City. We live in the same time as everyone else in the world. We have as much talent, we have as much verve, we have as much to say.
As we walked through Rowe's hometown of Columbia and South Central Kentucky, he pointed to some of the things that tickled him about his hometown and his childhood. The home where author Mark Twain's parents were supposedly married.
So I can say I've played Dungeons and Dragons in the room where Mark Twain's parents were.
He recalled afternoons spent stocking up on books at the library and comic shops.
I became known as the kid who would walk around the square reading. I developed great facility. I knew all the sidewalks so intimately that I could read a book and step over the cracks in the places where they were heaved up and so on.
Rowe just moved back to his home county a few weeks ago, where his family's cattle farm is located. We met at the Adair County Public Library.
I can live anywhere I want, and I wanted to come back home. I wanted to live here.
His writing has often revolved around rural Kentucky, often in the future or in fantastical circumstances.
When I was in New York recently to do a reading, I remember introducing myself. I said, my name is Christopher Rowe, and I really do talk this way.
In many of Rowe's short stories, the idea of home and homecoming are central. He mentioned a book by early 20th century author Thomas Wolfe called You Can't Go Home Again.
Thomas Wolfe was wrong. Not only can you go home again, you can't ever leave. If you search yourself, you will acknowledge that where you are from is part of who you are, part of what you are. And you can't leave that. And for some people, that's not a good thing. There are people from terrible places. I'm from a wonderful place.
Just as Rowe explores his own hometown, walking its hills to, for example, find the source of the town branch, he also has projects to explore all of Kentucky's 120 counties.
I think 120 counties is exactly the right number.
For one, he set himself a perhaps odd goal to ride his bike from each county's town seat to their point of highest elevation. It's ongoing.
You know, you get those places where the roads are a little bit washed out and some coal truck comes around in the corner at 70 miles an hour and you're on a 5-pound bicycle wearing Lycra.
But a more salient project, perhaps, is his Uncommonwealth series.
I have been writing quite short stories, just like 1,000 words or so, about each of Kentucky's counties. I wrote one about Bourbon County that people really like called Bourbon Queens.
Rowe is convinced that every Kentucky county has something strange and unique and, as he put it, delightful about it.
And I'm proud of where I am. I mean, if you don't like the way I talk, well, I got no time for you.
He says sometimes other writers and friends don't understand why he would move back. But for Rowe, the people and places that make up his hometown serve as inspiration for fantastical works of science fiction and fantasy. I'm Sylvia Goodman in Columbia.
Until next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Dinosaur Burps, Sierra Farrell, Sean Watkins, Joe Dobbs and the 1937 Flood, Paul Loomis, and Blue Dot Sessions. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Chris Julin. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter @AnnAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.
A salty magic place. If you find yourself going under, you'll remember the taste.